Hello, everyone. Welcome or welcome back to the Dan Nessel Show. I'm your host, Dan Nessel. It's been a while since we talked about something that shows up from time to time in my conversations, something that actually got me started with all of this. Now, I'm not talking about like buying a mic or even shitteration, which was the topic of my first episode. I'm talking about mindset, talking about self-awareness, that sort of thing. Understanding the abundance mindset, the abundance mentality, and the belief systems that get in the way. All of that helped me to start my show and improve my life. But let me tell you, the struggle is real. It's easy to fall back into fixed mindset habits, repeat old mistakes, or even make new ones. I think my guest today may have a thing or two to say about that. He's a marketing pro and entrepreneur who went through his own journey of transformation, and he now helps people to stop feeling stuck, unfulfilled, and frustrated with his mindset freedom and mindset accelerator coaching programs. I'm really looking forward to exploring mindset, belief systems, coaching, personal development, health, all kinds of good stuff on the show today with Baltimore's very own Luke Harlan. Luke,
Hey, it's great to be here. Thank you for that warm introduction.
you got it, man. It's good to see you. I'm glad that we were set aside time
All good.
to talk about this. No, we're all real on this show. I don't edit out the flubs. Um, But what I really, I wanted to start off really by first of all, thank you, but also pointing out, yes, yet again, we have another connective connection here. And I can't plug that group enough. The connective has been really great and introduced me to wonderful people. And that's how I met Luke. You're going to hear probably more about it as time goes on. And, apart from that, we had a conversation a while ago, hit it off. We both have kids around the same age. And Luke's journey, like, eerily parallels parts of mine. And I'm sure we're going to kind of get to that as we go. But first, I want to just kind of hand it over to Luke. Luke, man, give us, how'd you get to where you are? Like, it's a very fascinating journey to go from like a marketing guy to now a transformational coach.
Yeah, it's been a personal journey along the way, along with actually, helping others in various industries. Um, if I take a look at my career, over 20 plus years, I won't give the exact number because as I'm aging, I'm in complete denial. But I've always felt that, I've always been sort of a mentor or a coach or a leader. You just give yourself different titles when you're helping other people in an organization to become better, to, do their jobs more efficiently, more effectively, take ownership of those sort of things. So I've always been rooted in that sort of teaching. Back in the day, I would have more ego and call it consulting or give it a fancy
Mm.
title, but really it's just helping somebody else acquire a little bit of knowledge so they can do better in what they're looking to do. So I've been in a bunch of different industries, and the marketing piece really evolved out of being in the mortgage industry, having my own shop, and then really focusing on. I was very fortunate to have a business partner who did the operations and lender relations and all the technical
Mhm.
stuff. I got to work with my loan officers and my salespeople and really dive deep in understanding how to be a better marketer for the company. Being a part owner, and it was one of those things where I developed the skill set and invested a lot of time, and then we unfortunately had the debacle of 2008 with the mortgage crisis and the whole housing market collapsing for all those reasons. And I just was, had my hat in my hand. We didn't have that industry anymore, but I had the skill set in marketing. So I started I hung my shingle out there as this kind of, strategic marketing consultant. And it was really funny because I gave a talk to this group of CPAs. My neighbor invited me to talk about, marketing 101. And I remember a woman, like five or six people, like would like lined up to ask me questions after this talk. And one of them said, "Oh, do you do, coaching and consulting?" And I just looked her dead in the face, completely lying, and said, "Of course I do." Uh, and a friend of mine pulled me aside and goes, "You don't know what you're doing." And I like, "Well, teach me." So I started getting into that field, and that just really evolved. And then I added a digital marketing agency on the back of the strategic marketing consulting, so I could provide, the upfront, strategy, and then provide the services on the back end. And what happened is over the years, as that grew, as I evolved, as I learned more, as I was, open and curious to figuring out how I could deliver more value, what happened was is that the agency grew and became very service oriented. But what I really loved about what I did was working with the people, the leaders, the CEOs, the entrepreneurs, business owners, to really, figure out how to make them better at what they did, and not just give them a bunch of services and be commoditized. And what I found
Yeah.
out in that kind of that consultative role was that there were people that would just hit home runs with the strategies we give them, and then there would be others who just hit singles and doubles. And I was like, wait a minute, they have the same assets, they have the same strategies, they have the things to do. Why are some, singles and doubles, and why are some just, just crushing it? And what dawned on me was that this paralleled where my life was, is that in certain areas of my life, I was hitting home runs. And in certain areas, I was, sometimes I wasn't even getting off the bag. Like I just, there was something in the way. And what I started to realize, what was in the way was me. Was
Well, can
oh, I'm sorry.
can I ask you, like, just to interrupt there for a second, because you're talking as you talk. I keep thinking. I mentioned earlier, like, there's some eerie parallels. You know, like it sounds like you hit this point where you just like where you felt unsatisfied, unfulfilled. Where you knew something was wrong. What was going on in your head at the time?
It,
What were the signs? Like, what were the
the
warning
warning
signs that you
signs,
knew that you needed to shift?
it's very subtle. It's the
Yeah.
gut feeling that you were meant for more, that you had the capacity. And sometimes you think that, wait, what is it? Just ego? Do I think I'm like better than anyone? Like you really go through these questions. But it was really that just I felt like I was, kind of destined to be more, to do more, to have more impact. And I think it was at the point where it was really going like the level of success, which to me I've learned over the years is kind of like check boxes. Okay, the kids are okay, the house is paid, like the basics.
Yeah.
And then we kind of attribute, okay, that's what we define as success. But I was lacking fulfillment. In my
Mhm.
business, I was lacking the passion to get up in the morning. It was just a mouse on the wheel type thing. I was tired of just doing the services, and that's when I fell in love with helping people within the
Yeah.
business. And then that's when I went through that kind of matriculation of, okay, what are the habits and characteristics of the people who are hitting home runs and being successful, and what are the behaviors of the people who are getting in their own way? And unfortunately, I felt like, oh wow, I was part of the group that was getting in their own way. And I said, well, how can I help my
Interesting.
clients? How can I help myself become better? Because I had that epiphany. That epiphany was like, damn it, if I'm not 100%, I can't give 100%. If my cup's empty, how do I pour into other people? So I have to work on myself first, figure it out, so then I can help my clients. And in marketing, we have the three-legged stool of message, market, and media, and but
Mhm.
then there was this mysterious fourth component, mindset. So I really started going down the rabbit hole and investigating and investing in myself and learning and taking courses and reading tons and tons of books on neuropsychology and how our brain works, and everything like that. And then that's when it started to click. That's when I started to glean pieces out of the puzzle of how to make my own personal transformations, how to have my mindset shifts so I could gain perspective. And it started with being open enough and vulnerable enough to kind of raise my hand and say, I don't know what I don't know. And so I started asking for help. And that help was, getting more knowledge, getting more understanding, being vulnerable, confronting my demons, and then kind of walking down that path. So I'd have the clarity to then make the necessary changes. And
Mhm.
inevitably, I fell in love with that process by creating a system and a coaching
Mhm.
program. And I got out of marketing, and I sold the digital agency. I did the strategic consulting for a while, but I realized that I wanted to change lives and not just businesses. Um,
You know, you you're really describing so many, like, there's so much there to unpack, and I wanna kind of just dial back just a little bit where you're talking about being open and vulnerable enough, to make those changes and to see what needed to be done. And I think, it takes a lot to. I mean, many people never get there, right? Let's face it. Many people go through life and, either never find the need to, they're satisfied and they're fine doing whatever they do. But this whole idea of understanding yourself, and I guess we're getting into self awareness a little bit here, but like being open and vulnerable enough, to, because I like the way you describe that, to really know, hey, it's time for me to make some changes, right? What I'm trying to understand here is, how long did it take you to get to that point in your career? And, you did mention there's a couple of, like, things going on at the time, a couple of, I think, some signs, that you were dissatisfied, but like, this isn't something that somebody just like wakes up and happens,
no,
right?
this is a true case of kind of the frog in the boiling water.
Hmm.
Heard the analogy that, you put a frog in cold water and you turn up the heat over time, they just kind of, they don't jump out, even though they end up in boiling water. It's just because they sort of, this is us making rational excuses. This is, telling ourselves the same kind of BS story of why things didn't work out, not taking accountability and ownership. That, the decisions you make, I mean, our lives are the sums of the decisions we make. But a lot of times we don't want to, stand in front of that mirror and really look at some of the things that we made poor decisions on or got results. We don't want to take ownership of that early on, and that's where I was with a lot of things when the mortgage industry collapsed, and then I went into something else. There was times it wasn't a smooth transition. It wasn't like, hey, it was no, it was rough patch. I was, it disrupted everything. I had to move. We had to sell everything. We were very, everything changed when that happened. But I kept, I kept denying the fact that I was a part contributor to it, and I just laid all the power and the onus of that, transition on the industry or the collapse. When there are things that I could have done better, there are decisions I could have made. So when you ask, like, it doesn't happen overnight. You don't. It typically would happen for most people. It comes to a rock bottom moment or something very,
Hmm.
sharp, which is crazy because this is it parallels to kind of, and this may sound odd, it parallels to, like, healthcare. Like, it's really sick care. People don't do preventative medicine in their life, or preventative psychology, or preventative mental health. They just, until something's broken, then they get help. And that's where the rock bottom correlation is, until they break their arm, or, discover a lump, or, something's off,
Hmm.
then they go to the doctor. And now it's not healthcare, it's sick care. Healthcare is, taking care of yourself every day, eating right and exercising, and just, meditation or mental wellness or whatever's in your bag of tricks to stay focused and
Hmm.
healthy on both mind and body. But that's the thing.
Yeah.
It's like I was the frog in the boiling water, and I had these series of
Hmm.
events of businesses transitioning or collapsing in different areas. That's when I had the epiphany, when I started looking at all the puzzle pieces and say, which puzzle piece have I not trying to change? Because I tried industries, I tried different
Hmm.
tactics, I tried, different markets to go after. I tried all these different, variables, and the one variable I'd never really addressed was me. And I realized I
Yeah.
was the common denominator in all of this equation. And I was like, and when that hit me, it was a gut punch. It really was, because I realized that I'm, I'm the commander of my own ship, but it's not just me. At the time I had a wife and kids and responsibilities and employees and things like that. And that's when it really kind of,
Yeah.
I was very raw, I would have to say, at that point.
I can't blame you. I mean, it's never just one thing, is it? Right?
Oh,
It's
never.
it's and I like the analogy, the story, the image of the frog in the boiling water. I mean, that's very apt description of so many of our careers or lives. Just sometimes it's not necessarily boiling water. Sometimes people are. It's a good thing for people to be in the same place, and they're satisfied.
Sure.
Wonderful. However, for many of us, it's what's interesting is that just going back to something you said about sick care, about the lack of preventive care, or the lack of preventive knowledge, or activity. I think when we look at our careers, when we look at our business, when we have families, we're not our culture, at least certainly for people of our generation, Gen Xers, right? We grew up. I never learned about this stuff, and you start to look at things that happen in your career and the externalities that are all around you, but you have to grin and bear it. Show must go on. That kind of mentality is out there, and it wasn't until you know um, I don't know, well into my career and well into my adulthood that you start to hear things like there's something called mindset, and there's something called self awareness, and there's reasons that these things happen to you. So in your case, you're going through all this stuff, and you had it took a long time. Like it almost things had to crash out and kind of, I guess, maybe bottom out might be too strong of a term, but you know, like disaster almost has to happen before you take a strong look at yourself and say, "Holy crap, it's me." And I think,
Well, that's hard. It's
you know,
really hard to, to do
yeah,
that a lot of times. Is that, I mean, we'll take, I would say, top level or superficial responsibility. We might put on the
mhm,
bravado for the boss or the leader or something. Yes, the buck stops here. But when it's deeper, when it's emotionally tied and it's intrinsically affecting, truly your core happiness and your identity and the way you approach the world and things like that, it can really mar and um, create murky waters as far as
you know,
how to sail and navigate into the next direction. And that's when you start feeling, and it creates all these feelings that you're not good enough a lot of times, and then you're not
yeah,
enough, and you don't feel these things. But you got to put on the bravado because we are that generation. Like rub some dirt in it, you skin your knee, you keep on going. Whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and you hang on these affirmations, especially as men, because we're supposed to assume this role where we're tough guys who don't ask for directions and we're okay, and because that's a lot of times it's generational, or it's what's instilled in your
yeah,
belief set because that's what you were exposed to, and that's your default wiring, that you've been
mhm,
put together over the years, and and we don't check against it. We don't look at it and validate and verify. And that's one of the things that we
yeah,
do, or I do in my coaching program, is we go into those things to make sure we're not operating from a place of incongruency of what we're trying to accomplish as adults. But it is hard, and I appreciate and I have great empathy for people who are in that fear and that paralyzation and that hesitation, because I've been there, and it takes a huge amount of courage to raise your hand and be vulnerable and say you need help, especially if you're situationally, that's a negative in your mind, or that's a connotation that you've just adopted, and thinking that hey,
yeah,
I'm weak because I'm asking for help. And that's absolutely not the case. It's actually a point of strength, because if we look back when we were kids, we asked for help all the time. That's how we learn and grow, and that's how we're nurtured, by our communities and our families, who love us. And but guess what? As adults, other people love us. This is We are meant to be, in my opinion, givers, to live a life of service to help other people. Otherwise, why else would we naturally form communities and be attracted to like-minded people, and want to lift each other up for the most part? We'd just be single-celled organisms swimming in some primordial soup if we weren't, destined and designed to work together. So I think
yeah,
that's what it really boils down to at the end of the day, is that you need to give yourself permission to do things differently. You need to give yourself permission to let go of some of the past and to take ownership and accountability of your life, so you can make the decisions to make effective changes. And I mean, that's the core of mindset freedom. That's the core of what I do, because I'm really just empowering people to live their best life under their own guidance, but give some clarity and perspective that they have that power, that they don't have to give it away to the intentions and the thoughts and the expectations of their family, their friends, or community, or the environment they're in, and live someone else's life. And this is why people get depressed and miserable and feel less than, because they're competing
yeah.
against the expectations of people who honestly don't really care.
It's 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 crazy when you think about that we get to that point in our lives where, you know, where, we're beating ourselves up all the time, can't get out of our own
Oh yeah.
way. But you referred to something a few times, and I want to kind of grab on it a
Okay.
little bit. You talked about, um, you know, basically the default wiring, your
Hmm.
default network, and belief
Sure.
systems, and and that sort of thing. Um, and then ultimately, what it comes down to is you have to ultimately give yourself permission, right, to change, or to shift, and
Mhm.
we'll get into that as well. But if you have that default system, if you have that, if your default wiring is set so that you know you, you can't get out of your way, right, and it leads to these feelings of, oh, I'm not good enough, or I'm not, I'm never gonna X, or money's, that's for other people. There's all different ways that those belief systems
Oh
manifest.
yeah.
How do you start to kind of recognize that and then start to overcome it, so that you can then get to the point where you give yourself permission? And I'm just asking because that giving yourself permission, I mean, the work to get to that point can be arduous, but that is in so many ways the beginning of the journey.
You've basically summed up what I do for people and what I help them with.
Ah,
Because that is a journey, and actually, you just encapsulated. There are 5 distinct mindset shifts that you go through systematically and
okay.
sequentially. to get to that mindset freedom. And you've just touched on the first three. And the first one is awakening into self-awareness. And self-awareness has many parts. The beginning part is that people who are listening to this podcast, or people who are listening and going out there and actively pursuing information to expand their knowledge base, they are already in self-awareness because they've just transitioned from the unconscious incompetent to the conscious incompetent. And what that means is
Mhm.
where you are like, hey, I don't know what I don't know. That's being consciously incompetent, meaning I don't have the knowledge, incompetent, but I'm conscious of it. I'm aware that I need to know more. So if you're listening to this, applaud yourself. You've already in that first shift.
Hmm.
So one of the things that we empower, or I empower my clients with, is that brain awareness, is to understand how we're wired, and what our brain does, and how external thoughts, stimuli comes in. We have a thought, we have an emotion, it goes to our belief system. Our belief system, what we believe to be true, and we'll get into that. And then we make a decision, we have an action, and we get a result. And that happens in a nanosecond. And it happens subconsciously. 96% of our thoughts on every day just go straight through the automated process, and we continue to get the same results. So what self-awareness is that we want to do what Viktor Frankl often talked about, is separating the distance between stimuli and response. When something happens, and then before we respond, we create that distance so we can look at it with our critical thinking brain and not just our automatic emotional brain that passes it straight to the system into making an action and getting a result. And we want to ask, does this serve us? Is this something
Mhm.
that we should be doing if we're consciously aware of making a change? And so that's the first thing, is that where we start becoming observers of our thoughts. And that takes time, but there are practical exercises. But that's the first beginning of your journey to start identifying that. We go to the next phase, which is accountability and ownership, where this is that permission base, is that you have to come to, the terminology, so I'm going to come to Jesus, look in front of the mirror, and
Mhm.
take accountability and ownership that your thoughts are something that you control, that you don't give power away to other people to dictate how you think, feel, and act. That you have to take ownership of that. When you do, it's a great cathartic, freeing moment, because you realize that if you are in control of your thoughts and your actions, and then the result, you are actually in control of your life. And once you take that, that's that second shift, which goes right into beliefs, because now you're aware of it. You realize you have that onus of control. And then it goes into the belief sets, which is something that people don't understand, is that 95% of your core beliefs were installed like hardware, like an operating system, back before you were 7. Because before you were 7, your brain couldn't critical think. It just wasn't evolved enough.
Mhm.
So you couldn't discern the difference between, pushing back against a truth or a non-truth. Everything that was told to you by an authority figure, by the TV you were exposed to, your community, your family, you believed to be true. And so all those beliefs that you were exposed to. So if you grew up in let's say an economically unstable household, or you were taught that rich people are bad, or the only way you accumulate money is by stepping on other people, or if you look at relationships and your mom and dad fought all the time, um, you start, those are things are subconsciously embedded in your belief set. And you don't, the problem is that now you go on to the adult, and if you haven't challenged those, and then this is why people have scarcity mindsets, this is why people
Mhm.
have fear of intimacy and being open and truthful, because of things that they experience which they don't realize is part of their fundamental belief record. And this is what gets washed against when there's a stimuli that comes across. They have an emotion, and then they have belief, and they go, is this, what's the binary reaction, what's the decision I'm going to make on this? And they take an action or an inaction, which is an action unto itself. And then they get a result. And if they're not happy with the results, they have to look at that belief set. And this is where we give them permission, because now they're aware, they're consciously aware, they're being an observer of it. And they come into the belief set and they look, now we give them permission to say, look, you can validate and verify the belief. Let's say killing people. I validate that that's a bad thing, and I'm going to verify to myself, we're going to hold on to that. Now, what if it's scarcity? No, wait a minute. My critical brain says there's an abundance. The pie is forever. There's enough for
Mhm.
everybody. But my subconscious says no, it's scarcity. We got to save. We got to minimize. We got to think small. We got to be grateful for what we have. And so you're going to have incongruency, because you're going to go out there and say, hey, no, I want the bigger pie. I want this affluence, or I want this abundance so I can give unto others. And that's just but you're going to sabotage yourself. You're going to sabotage the
Mhm.
opportunity. You're going to close your off to your vision. You're going to put some blinders on. Things are going to happen subconsciously that are not going to allow you to achieve those goals. You'll get frustrated. You'll feel not enough. And it's going to go down that rabbit hole where now you're attacking your own identity as not being able to do those things, which is a huge which it crushes people. When the reality is that you just have a belief set that you need to challenge and choose a new set of habits and behaviors that are going to pull you out of that, and that's going to reinforce you becoming, evolving the next version of yourself that can accomplish those things that are in congruence from now your new belief set to your actions, your intentional actions to get the results that are different. And then they're going to be in alignment, and you're not going to have that friction, which causes the anxiety, the depression, the fear, the hesitation, and all those sort of
Mm.
ailments that are what we call, getting in your own way, or those obstacles. So, right there in the first three shifts, which you touched on, that is the practical execution and systematic way we start building you back up by educating you on how everything works. So now you have an onus of control, and then you have exercises in which you can practice and leverage the skills that you're building to start building the life that you want, because now you're taking control of the mechanism. And it has nothing to do. And the one thing I'll say till I'm blue in the face, everybody who's listening, right as you are enough. You are not broken. All that has happened is that the wiring, the operating system, like you go to the store, you buy a computer, it comes with an operating system. You just need to change the operating system because it doesn't serve you. That doesn't mean you're broken. It just simply means that what was done can be undone. We have neuroplasticity in our brains. We have the ability to
Mhm.
rewrite pathways, create new habits, behaviors, beliefs. All those actions that you take, the sum of that is your identity. You can change those at any time. You are not anchored by the past. You have every opportunity to change the future by changing yourself and the way you think. And that's why mindset is so critically fundamental.
Woo! That's exactly, I'm glad you kind of explained that because, I just kind of, thought of a couple of the like the journey that I've been on and the way that it, figuring out, I guess, my own belief system and figuring out mindset sort of worked for me and continues to be a challenge, right? It continues to be and you're talking about neuroplasticity, you're talking about your operating
Mhm.
system,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it sounds like, and I know from experience, it's just knowing that it's there is a big thing. But rewiring or changing the way that you approach your belief systems, it's you can slip back
Yeah.
without vigilance, right?
It's a skill. If it's not
Yeah.
sharpened, it's going to retract. It's going to go away. It's a perishable skill.
Mhm.
Because what people don't understand is that your habits and behaviors are like grooves in a record. They're never going away. You're just making deeper grooves and new grooves in different records, and that's what neuroplasticity is. It's rewiring. It's creating literally new neural pathways for those habits and behaviors and the things. But what happens is if you're not diligent, and this is why structural tension's great, routines are good, plans, those sort of things,
Mhm.
is developing those skills and practicing and executing them on a daily basis is what's going to keep them sharp. What happens is if you take the foot off the gas, you're going to go back and you're going to default. There's a high probability of defaulting
Yeah.
into those old routines because they're still there. They're still grooves in a record.
Is there validity? And then I've heard this from some guests and from multiple sources, but is there validity in the 21 days, 66 days, 90 days to build a habit, and that, like, I don't believe that everybody is subject to the same exact measure. I mean, we're all quite different, even neurologically. But what is, in your experience, and how do you help people understand, that habit forming, um, positive habit forming is, and overwriting your operating system takes time and
It
so
does
on.
take time.
So,
I mean,
yeah.
scientifically, it's 66 days. I mean, 21 days, you can't do
66.
anything. 66 days is when it really becomes rooted and becomes pragmatic default behavior. But one of the things is that with that, with any sort of habit formation, it's how you go about it. There's different methodologies, and typically the ones you want to utilize the best, the ones that are going to is being what are called habit stacking. You want to cement new
Okay.
behaviors onto existing behaviors. If you're getting healthy, uh, every time I walk the dog, I go for an extra block. Every time I brush my teeth, I'm going to look in the mirror and say 5 affirmations. Every time, you're going to stack things that you normally do in your routine behavior that are really innocuous, that are just musts, like bathing and brushing your teeth or doing ordinary
Yeah.
things. And if you can create those new habits, whether it's mental clarity exercises, meditations, affirmations, or if you're going into physical health and wellness, that you just you start transplanting those that are just piggybacks. So you have an automatic cue, and these are called cues that like,
Hmm.
hey, now the habit stacking is I brush my teeth and then I do this. I walk the dog and then I do this. And then that's when you reinforce behaviors because they're not new. They're not a shock to the system. They're just coupling onto existing things. Uh,
Yeah, I mean, so many of us and so many people seem to fail at this because you get excited about starting something new, or you set out to do something. And let's just take health for
sure.
example, right? Just like the first most basic thing that's very complicated and extremely important is to be healthy and have healthy, sound mind, sound
Yep.
body, or sound body, sound mind, whatever. And and I know that that's kind of where you often start your programs with people, and because that's part of your journey as well. But when you talk about health, like, we know it's the right thing to do, but still, like, getting up and exercising is, ridiculously hard on, like, some days,
Well, yeah, yeah,
right?
well, until it becomes a habit,
So
but here's the thing with
right.
any execution, and this is where
Mhm.
people fail is because, they look at things in the wrong order. They gravitate towards the how, and the how is actually just the last thing you gravitate toward. There's, 3 questions you need to ask yourself, and the first one is, actually, the first 2 is, "What do you want?" Like, you really have to come to clear with yourself, what do you actually want in life? What do you want? And that's a tough question because
Yeah.
most people are just defaulting to what they think they want or what they've been told that they want, or they're limited into saying, "Oh, well, this is the only thing I'm good at and can do." And those are no, but what do you really want? And then the second is you got to have an emotional tire. And that is why do you want it? This is why Simon Sinek was so popular and came out with his TED talk was the
Mm.
intrinsic why. What is the emotional baseline, because we are emotive creatures. We have 2 brains
Yeah.
really in our thinking capacities. We have a critical brain, which is our logical, pragmatic reasoning, and then we have our feeling, our emotional, brain. And this is why, a lot of times in sales, and Tom Hopkins was great about this, was, if you're getting into, old school, was that we buy emotionally and we justify logically. And that's how we, pragmatically approach most things. Is that we, the emotional tie-in, we can say what we want, but if there's no intrinsic why, if we cannot envision the outcome, how it's going to make us feel, what are the benefits and the outcomes of achieving what we want to achieve, we're going to have no anchor when it's time to do the work. And when we're in the routines and we're
Right.
trying to develop new habits and getting up early and exercising and changing our diet, nutrition, or studying, or public speaking, or asking for a raise, or having that honest communication with your spouse, or whatever it's going to be, whatever the hard is, because anytime we go out of our comfort zone, it's going to be hard because we're going to face neurological resistance, from our amygdala, which is our 2 almond shaped things in our brain from prehistoric
Mhm.
times that said if you change anything in your habits, you're going to die because you're going to be eaten by a saber-toothed tiger or something. Like,
Yeah, the
but
lizard
we
brain,
haven't
yeah.
matured past that. Our brains are still animalistic in a lot of different ways. So we have to, but at least knowing that, and this is what we touched on earlier, by knowing how we think and operate gives us an onus of control, so we can understand that voice, that naysayer voice that says don't do these things. We can start to ignore it because we understand where it's coming from. It's not, we have, that is something that, you're empowered with. But when it comes back to why do people quit easily, it's because they don't have a strong enough reason. They haven't really sat
Yeah.
down, or it's not something that they really want or are ready for, but they say it is because they're kind of taught to say, "Oh, it's January 1st, time to, new year, new me." Like that's
Yeah.
same bullshit. Like it's not. They're not ready for it. You have to be ready to be able to commit to something that's life changing, and the only way that's going to happen is if you hit rock bottom, or you make a pragmatic
Mhm.
decision based on this is what I really want, and this is why I want it. And you got to hold that in front of your face every single day, because it is hard when you start getting into a new habit, because that naysayer, a trickster voice,
Mhm.
is going to be echoing in your head 24/7. Just hit snooze. It's okay. You can push that off. You don't need to do that. Why? It's a
Mhm.
killer. And that's why it's so hard. That's why mentors, coaches, courses, and exist to help provide you that external accountability and belief that you
Mhm.
can, and they'll extend that into your world until you start taking the action steps that prove it to be true, and then you take ownership of it, and then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because now you're in the driver's seat, and because of the little wins, and we call that just reinforcing the belief cycle.
Sure. And it dawned on me, we have, you know, you'd think that the motivation to live a longer life or to be healthier or be there for your kids or whatever would be enough to get somebody out of bed in the morning to run the 5 miles, or would be enough to have somebody get on the treadmill or buy a weight set. But yet we continue down these paths of self-destructive behaviors, excuse me, or refuse to change when clearly that's a great why. So what is it that's getting in between there?
Honestly, it's because we're championing lazy. We're championing the fact that of instant gratification, and we're
Hmm.
really discounting work. I mean, you took 40 years ago, work was, everyone worked hard and there was a work ethic and these sort of things that were championed. Now it's, everything's, an Instagram. Look at me, I'll be a millionaire overnight, and these shiny red objects. And this, because delayed gratification takes strength, it takes will, it
Hmm.
takes tenacity, it takes grit, and it takes patience. And these are things that require that four-letter work, that word, work. And we've
Yeah.
just denigrated it to the point where, oh, I don't want to work. I want the easy way around. And it's championed in our media and our culture and our social media and those sort of things. And at the end of the day, when you say, oh, we can, because I also health coach and help people, become healthy and live an optimal lifestyle. And part of the intrinsic nature is I get very frustrated. 70% of Americans are overweight or obese. They're going to get
Hmm.
cancers. They're going to get diabetes, type 2 diabetes. They're going to have heart constrictions. They're going to be on medications. They're going to be immobile at some point. But the problem
Yeah.
is it's not happening tomorrow. Is
Yeah.
that they don't, it's a slow death. And by the time they realize it, and by the time they're immobile or their heart gives out or they're on statins and $1,000 worth of meds, um, at that point now it's medically critical. We're in sick care. We're not in preventative maintenance or healthcare or optimal living. And that they might not have the resources or the capacity. And that time it becomes super overwhelming. I mean, look at these people who are 400 pounds. Like, dear Jesus,
Oh yeah.
like I understand that. I got very heavy. I needed help to
Hmm.
get to where to get back to a healthy lifestyle, because people don't understand is that your mind body relationship is absolutely intrinsically tied. When you're not providing right nourishment and nutrition to yourself, it chemically affects your brain. You have brain fog. You are depressed. It triggers these things.
Absolutely.
And then when you start getting healthy, that was my journey. I was 313 pounds. I had brain fog. I had no clarity. My quality of life, I was hiding. I wasn't social. I was, everything was just, kind of muted and blurry and gray. And then when I
Hmm.
took my health back and I had help doing that, I had a friend reach out, put me on a program, coached me. And as I lost the weight and gave me this freedom, I had this ultimate clarity. I had this energy. I had this confidence. All these intrinsic things came back to me. And once I had that clarity, it was like a lot of times if you've ever been to the beach or the ocean and you listen to the waves, or maybe, you have this moment of like, oh my God, this is what I want to do with my life, this pure clarity of purpose. And that's how I feel every single day by being healthy. And I want to give that gift to
Hmm.
others. But when people aren't healthy, they can't think like that. They're not pragmatically thinking about, I'm going to die or have a heart attack or develop these diseases along the
Yeah.
cure. And the problem is that when you push that in their face, thinking it's going to be a wake up call, all you're doing is triggering their uncomfortable brain to defend their lifestyle and to tell themselves BS stories and to live in that homeostasis of their normal, because that's how our brain operates. You cannot, that the fear doesn't change people. And that's this is why so many people retreat back, is because we're not treating the mental acuity of what happens to their perceptions of reality, of the conversations they're having in the head. We're just looking at the physical manifestation of poor behavior, and you can't scare them into something like that. Even doctors, I mean, they'll say you're going to die, and they're like, okay, and then they hit fast food on the way out because it's immediate gratification. It releases dopamine and hormones that make them feel good about themselves, and that because becomes their only psychological, care provider at that point. The only thing that
Yeah.
gives them happiness. So it's a complicated issue. Um, Even though we know the simple solution on paper is, eat right and exercise. It's
Yeah.
way more complicated than that, because we have a lot of different pressures, societal pressures, different perspectives, and unfortunately, we're just lowering the bar on people.
Well, what was so you know you got up to 313 pounds, and look, for the record, the people who can't see us because we're not on video today, Luke doesn't look like he was ever 300 pounds. I mean, healthy looking guy, like clearly somewhere around my age, probably, but like definitely good shape and obviously clear of mind. We've been listening and hearing all this wonderful stuff. What was the point like where you got that? Did you look in the mirror one day and just say, okay, I've had enough, or was it an experience that pushed you
It was an experience which I'm
somewhere?
going to get emotional on
Yeah.
because
Oh.
it hits me every time. Um,
Mhm.
I was this happened. Yeah, it was 2019? Yeah, 2019. I was
Wow.
313 pounds. Life wasn't great. I was divorced. Two kids. Work was okay. That was the one thing I could focus on, but everything else was really just. I wasn't dating. I wasn't putting myself out there. I stopped networking. I mean, I literally saw a networking picture and I looked at the Facebook and I said, "Who is that? Look at that fat head," and it was me. Like I was just
Mm,
completely embarrassed. But I had registered through a good friend of mine years earlier to be a blood bone marrow donor. And
okay.
he had he still has a great organization called There Goes My Hero, which registers people internationally to be blood and bone marrow donors. So I got this call February, March of, I believe, 2019.
Mhm.
And this woman says, "Hey, do you remember signing up for this?" And I said, "Yeah, yeah." I says, "We have a critically ill leukemia patient who you matched
Oh,
with.
wow.
Are you still willing to go, through with this?" And I said, "Absolutely." And so they fast tracked me 30 days. And so just fast forward 30 days, I'm in a hospital bed. I'm lying in the hospital bed. I have like three chins, my rolls, everything. And I started crying because I realized that I had put myself here. Here I am.
Yeah.
There's a guy I found out later, the guy in his 50s in Germany with like three kids and nine grandkids and all this great stuff. You don't know at the time because the donor, they're
Mhm.
anonymous. But there was somebody else in the world who was dying of cancer, who was dying of leukemia, completely irradiated, waiting for my stem cells, waiting for this marrow. And he didn't do it to himself. He didn't put
Mhm.
himself in this bad position. He didn't ask to get cancer. But here I am, 313 pounds, and I did it myself to myself. And I
Mm.
just broke down. I get emotional right
I don't
now. If
blame
you
you.
can see me, I'm tearing up because it just hit me like a ton of bricks. This is not the life I want. And I have complete control. I did this to myself. No one else put food in my mouth. No one else didn't go to the gym. No one else sat on the couch and drank too much and ate too much and, self-medicated their issues away. I wasn't facing it. I was hiding it. And I was just creating more problems. And I realized when I can't do this. And it was actually a little bit of divine information because after I did the donation, I remember a couple days later driving and a friend of mine reached out who hadn't talked to me in a while and he said, "Hey, how you doing?" And I just point blank, no hesitation. I said, "I'm miserable. I'm at my
Mm.
low point." And he goes, "Tell me what's going on. Let's meet for coffee." And we did. And he just said, "Hey, I got something for you." He was a gym owner. He was a good friend of mine. And he said, "Look, we're doing this new program. It's been very successful. I think you should consider it, and I'll be your coach." And I jumped on, and I lost 65 pounds in a few months, and my life completely changed. Um, and
Jeez.
it was everything. It saved my life. It literally did. Um,
I I have to tell you, first of all, thank you very much for sharing that with me and with our listeners. Um, I have, I've been, I have never donated, marrow, but I certainly know from my own family. I had a cousin who sadly passed away from aplastic anemia a long while ago, and you just couldn't get it in time, and the importance of donating bone marrow, I mean, and plasma is just cannot be underestimated in today's in any day and age. And so thank you for doing that. And I'm sure that the family in Germany is forever grateful. But where I was going is that you arrived at this epiphany, and this rock bottom point in your life through an intensely positive experience. I mean,
yeah,
yes, you yourself felt terrible, but you were serving. Like
it was the
you
best
you
gift
you
I
made
ever
a
had. I can't even
eh,
explain when someone asks you to save their life and you can,
mhm.
it is life changing. It's you realize how unimportant the bullshit you tell yourself is.
Yeah. And I mean, no wonder you went through made changes, but I mean, so good for you. God bless you. Any of these great vibes heading your way, because that's, to make that kind of a transformation after you've essentially saved somebody's life, I mean, and then turn the mirror on yourself to say, hey, like, he didn't get there because of anything he did. Um, and yet I'm in a position to help, so of course I will. And yet, look at me, I'm not where I want to be. Just to go through that, even in a short period of time, you know, I can understand that it's transformational, and which and I don't mean to veer off of this topic,
Not at
because
all.
it's really, I mean, it's just so touching, and I really, again, thanks, Luke, for sharing that. But
Pleasure.
that, so now that gives a whole new perspective to the way that you're using the word transformation, and how you are, you know, basically taking other people and helping them to transform their lives, in various ways. I mean, of course, we talked about health, and I know that you said that you help people with their health.
Mhm.
Very, but right, your main focus is in helping people to shift their mindset and get out of their own way and get
Yeah.
unstuck. Um, a very far distance from where you are on that hospital bed, but still, I mean, when you're in that hospital bed and thinking about, like, how stuck you are, and how you just were not where you wanted to be. I mean, now you've encapsulated that into your program, and no wonder you've done a shit ton of reading and understanding and learning to get you to this point where you can grasp the neuropsychology involved, and the methodologies. And I can't imagine how much you've been reading the last several years, by the way. I mean,
It's
I've been dabbling in this stuff for a while, and I've talked to a lot of guests. And what always impresses me about people who are really serious about coaching, and who are so passionate about it, it's like there's never enough knowledge in the world for you to absorb,
Oh, absolutely.
right? You're a constant learner, and totally curious. And the one other thing I wanted to say, which really sort of came out to me during while you were leading up to your epiphany, is um, this whole idea of judgment. And you're judging yourself, clearly, at the end, and it's probably during that entire process that made everything worse for you. You wouldn't get out of your own way because you kept continually judging yourself, and that just put you in a terrible spiral. And that got to this point where suddenly, you realized that you can't keep doing this to yourself, and rather than judge myself, I now have to look in other directions, right? So turning your eyes outward for help, right? Um, I think that whole idea of judgment, and I've covered this before with some people, and I'm just curious to find out your thoughts. Really,
Sure.
um, you know, it's like the flip side of the mindset, of the fixed mindset. Like, if you have a fixed mindset, you're by definition inflexible. You're stuck on your old operating
Mhm.
system. You're not really making progress with yourself. You don't have the wherewithal to accept positive outcomes. There's all kinds of different things going on there, right? Uh, but the flip side of that is being judged, or judging, because then you're not flexible enough to see the alternatives in the way that you or others are behaving, right? So, how does judgment, being judged, sort of kind of come into play here, if you don't mind me
Oh, not
asking?
at all. I mean, well, the first thing you did say about fixed mindset is the problem with fixed mindset is that you're relentlessly guarding yourself from new information because you're in what's
Hmm.
called cognitive dissonance, meaning that you have limited information and you're just going to recycle it, which means you only have a singular outcome. The outcome is always going to be negative. You're stimulating your reticular activating system, which is your brain GPS. It's it's our guidance system. When the self talk that we have, when we tell our brains that I am having a shitty day, life sucks, your brain is going to go find and support that general thesis by finding opportunities to prove to you that life sucks. It's going to only look for the negative. And that's where people get stuck in this cognitive dissonance loop. It's just repetitive behavior because it's limited information. It's like having 10 Legos. You only can build like two things. Imagine having 100 Legos. Imagine having 1,000 Legos. Well, once you're open up to the opportunity to learn, and that's when you get into the growth mindset, you have more information. When you have more information, it changes your perspective. Perspective is all about opportunities, meaning now you can be reflective and critically. Now the judgment is not judgment. It's just looking at, you have, instead of just you have a path, you have A, B, C, D, and E, F path. And once you realize that you have the opportunity, that really allows us to then communicate with our intrinsic free will, our God-given ability to make choice. And choice is what gives us freedom in life. And we are
Mhm.
inherently born to acquiesce and to look for freedom. We want choice in our life. When we have limited choices, it really shuts down our creativity. It shuts down our positivity. We succumb to that fixed mindset. We lower our bar. We go from extraordinary to ordinary. Everything gets muted and blurred because of the lack of opportunity. And then we get frustrated. And the problem is when we get frustrated with lack of choice, and it turns into anger, it turns into negative emotions. It either boils inside with depression, anxiety, and fears and hesitations, or it gets redirected. And this is where judgment comes in. Judgment
Yeah.
comes in when we start projecting our own insecurities, our own fears, our own regrets, our own inactions on other people who are free from that. Other people are choosing growth mindsets. I just did a post on this about, don't let someone else, when you're shining, don't let someone else's kind of negativity blur that, because
Mhm.
we call it, haters. But really what haters are is that when you shine, when you go out and be proactive, um, when you intentionally do something and have the grit and the fortitude to see something through to achieve it, you're going to be glowing. You're going to be shining. And what you're doing that is for yourself. The problem is it shines and exposes to other people who witness it. It's holding up a mirror to them. And then if they wanted something and hesitated, or they didn't go through with something and they regrets for it, if they're part of a growth mindset, they're going to say, they're going to be inspired by you and they're going to be
Yeah.
awesome. And then I'm going to do better. And now it's time for me to get off my butt and do things. But if they're in a limited mindset, if they're fixed, they're going to hate the fact that they're exposing it, because it's unearthing this raw negative emotion, because they're compelled inherently to want more, but they're not doing anything about it. So they're judging themselves, but they don't want to accept accountability and responsibility. So they're just going to project that and hate and spew anger and start
Mm.
denigrating and trying to bring people down. And this is why it's really bizarre that we should be championing people who are successful. We should be learning from them. What are they doing that's different from us? But instead, we want to bring people down to our level. So that's where judgment comes in.
Yeah.
And that's really scary, because it's complete antithesis of supporting one another and serving one another and things like that. It's feeding our own ego. It's feeding our own limited capacity. And I understand why it happens. It's just very unfortunate. So as far as personally, um, there is no competition in life except for
Yeah.
yourself. Is that you can't measure yourself compared to other people, because there's so many different factors. Am I better than I was yesterday? Did I put in the effort to be 1% more? If I didn't, okay, what am I going to do differently today? It's not. It's setting your own expectations and not worried about what other people think of you. Don't give them that power, because it's your journey. I mean, so that's where I really see where judgment really comes in, is that there's self judgment, and then there is the projection of judgment on others, to make yourself feel better for not doing the things that maybe you feel you should be doing.
Thank you for elaborating on that too, because the more I hear about it, the more I discuss judgment. And by the way, I have my mug here is by the Coffee and Motivation Company, not a sponsor, uh, but it says, "I drink the tears of my haters." Right? I I keep that because I think it's funny, and it's got that Gen X kind of edginess
Yeah,
to it, which I like. But like, who cares what people say about me is kind of where that came from. Because when I first started this whole journey, one of the things was I was afraid of was I was afraid that I would be made a fool of, or that somebody wouldn't like me, or I didn't have the like typical imposter syndrome
sure.
type feelings. And didn't have confidence. I didn't feel like I had what it took. And it took a real step of bravery and a push from several people to really make that move. And you need those kind of external forces sometimes to get over it. But anyway, where I was going was that, judgment, it seems to me that the antidote to judgment is curiosity. And it's not my original thought. Walt Whitman probably said it first. Be curious, not judgmental, um, and passed on through Ted Lasso. But it's like it's it's so true to me that if I would just take a moment, if I have that, because like I said, the struggle is real. I said it earlier
Sure.
on with the fixed mindset, right? And I certainly have, in many ways, you know, not gotten over everything about the fixed mindset that I know was sitting behind me for the longest time. And by the way, you can be successful and you could like start doing well in life, but still have a terribly fixed mindset. And then, it feeds on itself. It's that one day you're going to fail, one day you're going to fail because, there's no way that that I deserve all of this. And one day you do, it's sort of, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. But I started thinking about this and more about curiosity and about where that comes from. Like, where does the
I
curiosity
can
come
tell you
from?
where it comes from.
That's why I'm
There you go.
asking you.
We're born with it. It's an insatiable thing. Look at kids. Do
Yeah.
kids have fear of judgment? They get on a bike, they fall down, they get back up. They go over and they talk to people. Total strangers, little kids will go play with each other. They'll find a commonality. They have no problem telling you what they want when they want it. There's no there is no fear. There is no judgment. They just want what they want and they're curious to learn. And unfortunately, this really gets kind of beaten out of them in a traditional school system.
Yeah.
That's where we start losing our curiosity and our creativity because it's outside the lines. We're kind of taught to conform. We're taught to fit in, um, and go along and get along. Don't rock the boat. So it's one of those things that this is where growth stops, and that it's very unfortunate. And this is what you got to go back to being a kid mentality.
Hmm.
You gotta stay like you just gotta be one. You gotta look at the stars and just wonder and like ask those curious questions. Um, and the more questions you ask, I mean, it's the gate of opportunity of perspective. And this is why being an ever learner is so critical throughout your entire life. And the greatest line I ever heard was, be, it's one thing to be an ever learner, but don't be a never doer. And that means
Interesting.
because the accumulation of knowledge is useless unless it affects something, um,
Mhm.
unless you use it, unless you utilize it, incorporate it. Like a library can't do anything. Having all the knowledge in the world but not executing on it, you might as well not have it in the first place because it doesn't do anything. Because there's entropy. You need motion. You need action. You need to create things. Life needs movement. And so that's one of the things about being curious is that it's just you can't get enough. I can't read enough. I can't learn enough because you have this infinite capacity. You're not going to retain everything, but it's going to
Mhm.
permeate who you are. It's going to give you a different perspective. It's going to allow you to be of more value. It's going to allow you to think differently. And the greatest thing it does for me is it allows me to evolve. I'm not going to be the same person I am a year from now. And I'm not the same person I was a year ago. And that's the best thing. And I love it. And I love the fact
Yeah.
because guess what? You could go through this iterations of imposter syndrome and, especially when you're out there and you're putting yourself out there and your fear of being judged by others, remember, it's because we have this expert mentality, like there are expert culture and guru culture. But really, what is an expert? An expert is just someone who knows who knows a few more steps ahead on the timeline that you don't. We're all on our own timeline. And there's
Yeah.
people above you who know more and people not below you in a judgment standpoint, just on the timeline of information and execution of how you do things. There are people ahead and behind. And that's fine. That's your life. Where you are in your timeline is exactly where you're meant to be because you can help people. When you teach a 5-year-old how to tie their shoe, you are a shoe tying expert.
Yeah.
You've given them a skill, a value that they can now pass on in their life. So I look at it this way and for people who are afraid to put themselves out there, you know something other people don't. It doesn't matter that millions of people already know it. There are millions of people who don't. Imagine
Yeah.
this. You know CPR. You walk out in the street and you see all these unconscious people. Are you not going to help them? Are you not going to offer to help them? You have a skill that can help them. If you don't take ownership and champion that and confidence in that ability and offer it to people, what is the purpose of you having that skill, of that capacity, of that value? And that's how you have to look at what you have inside you. What do you know now and who can you help? What can you learn more of and who else can you help? This is there's no imposter syndrome. These are self-built mind prisons that we do to ourselves all the
Mhm.
time. we live in these fears of judgments of people who, who aren't really judging us. Who cares if there's haters and naysayers and things like, do they live your life? Are you going to give them power? My favorite expression is, what other people think of you is none of your business.
Yeah.
And the coffee mug memes and things like that, we drink the tears of our haters. But if anything, you should have a tremendous capacity for empathy. Think about the life that someone has where the only derived pleasure is hating on other people. How miserable must you be to troll the internet, to try to bring someone down with a nasty comment or judge them on how they look or what they say or they stutter or whatever it is? I mean, really, how shitty is your life? That's what you choose to do with your time. You're not fulfilled. You're not creating happiness or joy or purpose or passion or contribution or value. Like, I feel freaking sorry for you. I have empathy and I'd like to help you, even if you're saying it
Yeah.
to me, because I understand that you are hurting. This is your way of saying you're hurting. And I'm not, I'm not judging you. If you choose to not embrace that, if you choose limited mindset, if you choose not to help yourself or meet yourself halfway, then I'm going to just depart from you. This is why you get rid of,
Mhm.
you separate yourself from people who are holding you back or toxic environments, is you move
Yeah.
on. And that's just the way of the world. It's like, I don't think more about you. I don't think less about you. I'm focused on my life and my purpose, my passion, and my mission. And I'm going to help those people who want to be helped. And that's it. And
Yeah.
this whole philosophy. I really wish I remember his name. Stephen. He was a guy. He was crippled with disease. He was smaller stature. He was in a wheelchair.
Stephen Hawking?
No, no, no. He was a
Yeah.
motivational speaker, and he
Oh.
had this great thing. He had a great talk. I heard him once, that he was talking to the Coast Guard pilots who go out and rescue these people off, in stormy seas and off these boats and things like that. And he was talking to one of the rescuers and said, "All right, there's a boat in the water with 14 people in the water in stormy seas, but you only can bring 10 of them back because of the capacity of the helicopter. Who do you choose to save?" And
Yeah.
very simply said, "You save the people swimming towards you."
Hmm.
And such
Hmm.
clarity. The people who want help, the people who are vulnerable, the people who raise their hand and say, "I don't know what I don't know."
Yeah.
Those are the people you help, because you can never drag someone across the finish line. You can't make somebody a better person if they don't want to be or they're not ready. You help the people in front of you who are waving their hands frantically saying, "I need help." And sometimes it's not them waving their hands. It's what they're not saying. It's what they're not doing. It's the way their posture is. It's the way they're communicating. It's the way they're beating themselves up. It's the way they might be hating on others. Recognize the signs of people that maybe you can help by being more compassionate and empathetic instead of judgmental, because that is their way of communicating that they need help, and they just don't know how to constructively say it because they don't know how to be vulnerable. They don't know how to let the defenses down because they're in survival mode and they're not
Yeah.
overly curious yet. And that's how I look at life, is that if they're swimming towards me, I need to recognize the signs so I can help them, or at least offer to help them. If they don't
Yeah.
choose to, that's fine. I'm not going to lose any sleep over it in a sense. And that's not judgmental. It's just saying, look, I did my
Yeah.
best. I offered. And,
Sure.
and that's, I love that analogy, because people get so caught up on, you can't save those who don't want to be saved. And that's just the reality of the world.
There's only so much any one person can do, right? I mean, and seriously, there's an opportunity cost to every action. Now I have to admit, I'm feeling a little guilty about my drink tears of my haters cup, but I mean, it's levity,
Sure.
but it's
Absolutely.
the whole point is that I am my own person. I believe and I know that I'm delivering a good service, but also, I'm delivering great knowledge and wisdom, I hope. Um, I'm giving a platform to people I believe in and that I want to hear from and learn from. I'm constantly learning through this, but really, I hope that all the people who listen are learning at least as much as I do. This whole idea of learning is so central to what I do, to what I want to do, and to being a better professional in my job as a communicator, and as a podcaster. If I'm not sitting here being curious and learning, what's the point? Like, why do I want to do this? Like, there's no other reason for me. It's really because I'm just dead interested in what people have to say, and I love having these conversations. And I learn. And selfishly, I start to create my own learning platform by talking to people like you, Luke.
It's one
it's my
it's
thing.
not here's the thing about, like, we get this negative thing about being selfish, and really what
Mhm.
self-care is, I mean, self-care is filling your cup up so you can pour it into others. You have to be selfish to take care of you first so you can be selfless. It's the same analogy of, you know what? I You can't help the poor if you're poor yourself because you don't have any resources.
Yeah,
So, these are the differentiators, is that, abundance and about self-care and self-improvement, and personal development. These aren't selfish acts. These are acts so you can be of more value and contribute it to the world and help others. Otherwise, again, you'd be the library with a bunch of knowledge, but not affecting or not impacting or not creating fulfillment of life for yourself. You can have That's the thing. It's like, you can do things for you and be good to others. There's no dichotomy. It's not one or the other. You don't have to martyr yourself. Um, this I think that's the binary world we get into, which is, I mean, it's like being grateful for what you have. You can
yeah,
absolutely be grateful for what you have, but be ambitious as hell and want more. That doesn't make you a bad person. It's because you have a growth mindset. You know the pie is infinite. You know there's so much
yeah,
abundance in the world to tap into, that you're not taking it away from someone else. If you believe in
precisely.
scarcity, that what you eat is taking it out of the mouth of someone else, then that is just diminishing both sides of the equation, and there's no growth there. Then you're just applying all sorts of negativity and limited scope of reference, and then happiness and joy go right out the window.
Yeah, totally. I have to say that, we've been talking for a while, and I wish I can continue this conversation. In fact, we probably should separately,
Sure.
offline. I have to say though, it's hard to top the help those who are swimming towards you metaphor. What a wonderful thing to think about, and a great way to kind of, encapsulate, that choice, that hard choice we have often of what do we do first.
Yeah.
Um, but be that as it may, I want to give you the opportunity to say, just like, is there any last kind of words? Is there any last bit of advice that you want to impart upon our listeners today,
I would
Luke?
yeah. You right now in your current state, you're more than enough. You have the absolute capacity to change your life, and it starts with you. It's a decision you get to make. And a lot of times I've been there where you feel helpless. You feel like you're not
Mhm,
enough. You feel like kind of life's against you. And if you can just switch to one little paradigm shift that I learned from a guy named
mhm,
Jim Detmer in the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership, an amazing book, is he taught me through his book of switching the mindset from life happening to you to life happening for you. It doesn't mean it's easy. It just means that everything happens for a reason. And if you treat the obstacle as the way, if you grow through what you go through, develop that thicker skin, skill up in tenacity, skill up in your resilience, you're going to tackle the next thing stronger, more confident, more belief in yourself. And that's how we grow. And you have the absolute capacity. Remember, what can be done can be undone. What can be learned is going to open your doors. We only have three things in life: mindset, skill set, and tool set. That mindset is something you have absolute control of changing by reaching out and asking for help and being provided that structure and that instruction of how to better yourself and get clearer in the pragmatic ability to then deal with what's happening to you and have absolute control over your emotions, decisions, actions, and the new results that you're looking for, so you can become the person that can create the change. Skill sets and tool sets you can acquire. Skill sets, we have the internet.
yeah,
Anything you want to
mhm.
learn, you can go out and get. Tool set is just to leverage the skill set. Those are acquisitions. You don't need to be special to acquire anything. So at the end of the day, I just say you have the power within you. It's your choice. It's not easy, but I just really encourage you to find that courage and ask for help, because there's so many people and so many resources out there waiting for you to swim towards them.
I love it, Luke. Thanks so much. Great last words, and I don't want to top it, but I'm going to try a little bit by not piling on your last words, but by telling people where they can go to find more about you and to get more of Luke. And of course, you can go to LinkedIn, look for Luke Harlan. His name will be spelled properly in the episode title. Also, go to lukeharlancoaching.com, where you'll find all about Luke, his approach, his philosophy. You'll get links to his free mindset freedom course, master course, and also, more information about his methodologies and coaching. And Luke, is there anything I've missed beyond those things?
Not at all. Not at all. Just the master
Yeah.
class gives you it's a free master class, half an hour, gives you the 5 mindset shift to creating your best life. It'll give the fundamentals of understanding the platform, and then you can investigate. And I always encourage people to follow up and question and send me communications. I love talking to people and learning about, how I can help you or point you in the right direction, because it's all about paying it forward.
And you want to talk about somebody who's really service oriented and really ready to pay it forward, and very generous with his time and with his advice. Look no further than Luke Harlan. I mean, you've just heard it for an hour. I'm impressed. I'm also frankly a little overwhelmed. I've got a lot of notes here to go through, Luke, from this tremendous amount of knowledge that you've imparted. I know that there's a lot of takeaways from this conversation for our listeners, and for that, I will forever be indebted. And I thank you so much for coming on the show and for giving us your time.
Oh, no, I appreciate the opportunity to share. Thank you so much.
You got it.